They do have a good marching.
Thank you.
Who we're talking about?
Ohio State.
Oh,
Damn band in the land.
really?
No.
Who? Okay, here we are. Yay. Well, it's nice to see everybody again so soon. Hopefully we'll get to keep meeting more often. I think we will, as a matter of fact, if we look in our short-term future. So I want to officially call this Committee of the Whole meeting for the Kalamazoo City Commission to order for Monday, December 5th. Just as a reminder, for anyone who might be tuning in, these are more often single topic meetings or in-depth meetings, and we'll be going over budget overview starting off tonight. And then we do have a regular business meeting that starts at 7. There's an opportunity for public comments at this meeting, and there will also be an opportunity at our business meeting. So our first order of business here to kick off our Committee of the Whole is roll call.
Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Hess.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Juarez. Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Juarez, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Cooney,
Second.
supported by Commissioner Hess. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? All right. Communications, Manager Ritzma.
Yeah, I do have one thing. This evening, you have in front of you a little sheet of paper that looks like this. If you recall, we have had mics cut in and out during meetings, and in consultation with the company that sold us the equipment, they think it might be that someone else has their microphone unmuted, so it's picking up that and cutting the other person out. So we just want to try tonight to keep your mic muted unless you're going to talk. So let's see if that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Ritzma. I'm going to be hitting this switch a lot more often here. Now is the opportunity for public comments here at the Committee of the Whole meeting. And public comments at the Committee of the Whole meeting are limited to 2 minutes. Please state your name and whether you live in the city. First, is there anyone in the chambers who wants to make any comments? Not seeing anyone. Deputy City Manager Chamberlain, has anybody called in?
Let's go ahead and check.
You know, I neglected to provide that phone number. Probably ought to do that at this time here. I think it's on the back. 888-382-9556.
Go ahead, you're with the Kalamazoo City Commission.
Yes, my name is Audrey. I'm a mother of 2 in Kalamazoo. I wanted to call really quickly and ask you, commissioners and city staff, to make a public statement about Representative Julie Rogers' statement to Eagle at the graphic packaging hearing that occurred last week on Thursday. I don't know if you were able to review her statement that was read and submitted to the record, but she raised concerns about the time that this process has taken, not moving fast enough to address the health impacts that are pending evaluation in our North Side neighborhood and throughout much of Kalamazoo. They have had violations over the past 10 years, and she made quite a profound and important statement about expediting all of the action in regards to this company. And I would encourage the commissioners to make a statement and to agree with Representative Rogers in her outreach to Eagle. And I would appreciate it if you could make comment on that. Thanks so much.
Okay. That was the only caller?
to do this all the time now. Thank you, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain. So we are down to the work of the evening. Manager Ritzma.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to call forward our Management Services Director and Chief Financial Officer, Steve Vicenci. We're going to kick off tonight with our 2023 budget overview. So we thought it'd be good to take some of what we would be presenting next week at our budget work session and throw it into the cow so we can spend more time next week talking about 2023 budget and more details around that. So I'm going to turn it over to CFO Vicenci, and he's going to walk you through the 2023 proposed budget. Steve?
There we go. And for anyone watching online, you can find our budget at kalamazooCity.org/budget. And then you can see our capital plan and our 2023 and all of our past budgets that are available on there as well. So we'll start off here where the 2023 proposed budget reflects the goals of IK 2025. In this budget, we have, an increase of, increased investment in services and lower taxes provided by the FFE. The FFE this year, again, providing $18.5 million to our general fund for budget stabilization and tax relief to reduce our millage from 19 mills down to 12, and I'm rounding off there a bit. And then the total budget for this year is our highest ever at $299.9 million. I couldn't quite get you guys at $300 million, but we came close. The general fund includes a balanced fiscal plan. It does include an overall deficit of $1.4 million. That is an intentional use of excess fund balance reserves in 2023, and those are used on one-time projects to maintain our 5-year and long-term operational goal of being balanced. And then it also includes an additional $30 million of capital investment compared to 2022, largely driven by increases in water, wastewater, and our streets funds. And here again, you see the total budget increase 22.2% to that nearly $300 million number. The split on this chart, governmental funds being $151 million, and our utility, water, and wastewater funds being $148 million of that total. The governmental fund budget increased 9.5%. This includes our general fund, our special revenue funds, which would include FFE aspirational, grants funds, our major and local streets, our solid waste fund, and other community development and other grants that we receive. And then also our capital improvement projects fund and our debt service funds. The enterprise funds here, as I mentioned, show an increase of 38.7% to $148.2 million. I do want to note on these budgets, they are currently undergoing review by our rate consultants. And then once they bring back their review, these budgets may require amendment depending on how they see our current budget fitting within the rates that are already set for us for 2023. Our general fund revenue is projected to increase approximately 5% to $75 million. And here you see kind of the breakdown with our largest portions being property taxes at $24.9 million, other revenue 18.7, which includes the $18.5 million that I mentioned from the FFE, and then also state grants or state revenue sharing, which is a majority of that $15.6 million that's listed there. And I do just want to make a comment too. Previously, our budgets have shown the FFE portion broken out. Due to changes in the state chart of accounts this year, we have to conform to a new layout of our chart of accounts, and that's why it's shown there with our other revenue. So I just wanted to highlight that it was not really our choice, but we're just kind of following what the state has for us this year. And then of that, as I mentioned, state revenue sharing, we're projecting that to increase year-over-year adopted budget to $10.9 million. I do want to highlight that this year, based on the state's projections, we're projecting to bring in $11 million. So we are seeing a slight decrease from what we're expecting through the end of this year. And we do receive these estimates directly from the state. And so the majority of that is built on sales tax throughout the state, and as we're all aware of, there's been quite a bit of stimulus the last few years, so we do expect some cooling off of that portion of the revenue sharing. And we also discuss here a little bit that we remain significantly below our 2001 level. There's a great website, savemycity.org, with savemicity.org, that goes back and explains the history of this. Historically, the statutory amount of revenue sharing, which is set by the legislature, was about 60 to 70% of total revenue sharing. It is now roughly around 25% on any given year. So you see that significant change in policy that happened back in the early 2000s, and they have a report that lays all the history and the detail of that very well for you. And then overall general fund expenditures are expected to increase about 4.6 million. And you can kind of see the breakdown of that here. We have 8 groups, or 8 departments that aren't listed here. Just for everyone's knowledge, that listing consists of our city commission, non-departmental expenditures, human resources, our city clerk, attorney, internal audit, our DEI budget, and our 311 budget. So if you go out to our website, this is all an interactive budget. You can click on that. It will then show you the whole pie chart. Just got a bit too cluttered having everything trying to show on one individual graph here. And then in the general fund budget and other funds, we're proposing 6 additional positions, including our sustainability coordinator, purchasing specialist, accounting supervisor, a public works field manager, a solid waste coordinator, and a part-time brownfield redevelopment project assistant. These positions will really help support our core services and our sustainability work as we move forward. And that brings our total budgeted positions to 674 full-time positions and 7 part-time positions. And then here we kind of look at our long-term fiscal analysis of where we're going to be over the next 5 years. You can see with the general fund, we're projecting to be above our fund balance target. So our fund balance target is 15% of operational revenues each year. And then our budget policy says anything over 20%, we would then spend the subsequent year on one-time expenditures. So that's where you see the maximum fund balance here. So we're kind of falling right in between that 15 to 20% range, which is right where we want to be, and showing that we have, long-term sustainability in what we're doing. Getting into our capital investment portion of the presentation here, we're investing over 110 million in our capital plan this year. Significant increase over the previous year, and specifically, especially when you look back compared to 2015, a huge increase in capital funding. I'll kind of get into the details of that here. We're obviously seeing a huge amount of federal grants that are coming in this year, and other grants and private funding that are coming in that historically have not been there. We're going to talk about this later tonight, but you see the DWRF bond there of 20.2 million. We're expecting about 15 million of that to be either forgiven or supported by a state grant. So really, it shows up on our capital plan as a $20 million expenditure. Out of our own funds, we're expecting somewhere around 5 million to come out. So a huge influx of grant funding that will help support our water system with that funding. Our bonding and reserve section here also includes a clean water revolving fund loan from the state. That is going to have less forgiveness. It'll have roughly about 10% forgiveness. We'll talk about this later tonight too. But it will include also a subsidized or reduced rate compared to the market, where it could be as low as 1.875% compared to market rates, which would be 3.5–4%. So again, a lot more funding out there that'll help us support our long-term plans and not hurt us with our sustainability in the future. But we also don't expect these forgiveness amounts and dollars to be available forever, but we're taking advantage of what we can while it's here. And then just one other highlight here, you see the intergovernmental portion, that's state and federal grants as well. So another 15 million of this total is supported directly by state and federal grants. So again, a huge portion of this, roughly 30 to 40% supported by one-time outside sources that allow us to get this work done and improve our future sustainability. Kind of some quick highlights here. We have 58 million in our water system. I just highlighted that 20 million of that was coming from the drinking water revolving fund. You see a few of the projects listed here of what that money will be applied towards. We'll get more into kind of those projects next week at the budget work session, but just kind of have them listed here for you tonight. And we also have a similar amount here being invested into our wastewater system. And I believe that may be a typo, so my apologies. Give me 1 second, I'll pull you up the right number. I know it says 58 million, but I think the number is actually a little lower. Our wastewater fund for 2023 is estimated to be 25.7 million, so apologies for that typo. Number's off a little bit there, but still a significant increase over prior years. And again, we'll talk about more of the detail of these projects next week as we get into that budget work session. And then here we have $21.5 million being invested in our major and local streets. Again, $8 million of that coming from federal and state grants, $2.3 million coming from our jurisdictional transfer, which were the streets that we accepted responsibility for in a transfer from the state. And so that way we can make the improvements that we want to make and help make Kalamazoo what we want to make it. So we're seeing that investment come into those plans and those projects that we've been talking about over the past couple of years. And then finally, we have $7.7 million from the general fund and our capital improvements fund being invested into various projects and programs here. Kind of, you know, again, our typical investment here into parks, public safety buildings and equipment. We have a new enterprise resource system, which would be our general ledger, our accounting software. Ours is coming to end of life over the next couple of years, so we're planning to be able to transition away from what we're currently in into a new system that will help us out, hopefully help us be more modern and find other cost savings as we move forward. And then here we have, you know, as we discussed at one of our more recent meetings, our $13 million in proposed projects funded by our American Rescue Plan Act. Just quickly highlighting here, $1.2 million in invested in business and downtown placemaking and regional marketing, $4.3 million to create affordable homes and address lead paint risks in homes, $1.5 million in infrastructure, including tree planting, street lighting, and stormwater improvements. Another $1.2 million for public safety, including facilities, retention, and emergency management. $1.3 million to continue our investments in youth, including our police athletic league. Another $1.2 million to help us replace the lost revenue that we've experienced during COVID in our parking and our streets funds. And then another $1 million contributed towards the farmers market multi-purpose event building. And that's a building that has multiple sources of funding between what we're currently planning for ARPA, city bonding, and private donations as well. And then $1.4 million to assist with good governance and administration of the funds. And then after this investment through this budget, we'll have $17.2 million remaining to allocate in future budgets. Just want to give you guys that updated number. And I guess I'll pause here for questions and discussion. I know I threw a lot of information at you in there in a short time.
Any questions for Director Vicente at this time? No?
I will,
No?
I'll bring it up and go to somebody else.
because he always goes, I'll go first.
Okay.
So thanks for that, Steve. I appreciate your due diligence on the budget. And so common questions that we see and that we hear, first of all, the large chunk of the budget, you see the pie chart with a large chunk on public safety. Can you talk a little bit about that and why we do that and why it is such a large chunk of the budget?
Sure. You know, for us, it's a large chunk because we have combined public safety with, you know, police, fire, EMS. Just one thing to highlight on that specifically, you know, we've always been very aware of that number, and we have largely decreased that number over time. So for example, I had it in here, I might have lost it. Of our total budget, I believe that's, what is that listed at 45%? Used to be 48%, and as high as, if you go back to like 2015 or earlier, as high as 55, 60%. So we have seen a decrease in the total allocation of our general fund to our public safety, and that's largely been achieved through just finding, cost savings measures, and as we've grown into being public safety, that's helped us save funding quite a bit as well. And when we've compared to other communities, they range anywhere from 50 to 60% typically of their total.
Is 50 to 60% of the other communities
Yes.
for fire and police and first responder?
Correct, yeah, when you add those all up, you may see, another budget which is 35% police, but then 20% fire.
So by having a public safety department, we are actually saving money.
Yes.
Thank you. There's also, we've had the conversation about water and wastewater when we actually voted to raise the rates. I just hope that we can keep our vision forward about continuing to invest in our water and our wastewater infrastructure and how important that is, and go back to the things that we talked about when we did talk about water and being able to invest in that for the future of this city. Do you have anything to say about the water and wastewater at that point?
I think, largely we're seeing a huge influx of needed capital improvement. Director Baker's much better speaking about this than I am, but you look back at our past history of capital improvements that we've done, like I said, in total, we're at a 600% increase compared to 2015. I think there were a number of years there where things were tight, where we couldn't afford to do it, but now we're having to make up for that, and we're probably having to do more than we would have had we been able to stay consistent in our improvements.
Thanks, Commissioner Hess. Other questions? Commissioner Brano?
Thanks, Steve, for being here. Thank you to your team as well for all their work. I sometimes wonder what it must feel like when you push send on that email on December 1st when you say, here you go, world, here's the budget that we've spent months and months working on. So thank you guys for all your hard work preparing that. On the $13 million proposed ARPA expenditures, there's that $1.4 million for admin and good governance. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about what is encapsulated in that?
Absolutely. Let me pull up my details here real quick. So, a majority of that is our 10% admin. None of the projects proposed have staff time allocated directly to them. So we're talking about the staff time required to actually carry out these projects throughout the general fund or wherever those positions may be located. So that's really the largest portion. We could easily just go back and allocate directly to those projects how much staff time do we think is needed. The federal government allows us to use a 10% as a de minimis rate, and that's what we've chosen to do. Alternatively, we could track every minute, every hour that someone spends on the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we've brought in. That would include, my time, our city manager's time, staff time just to carry out the projects, time in purchasing and accounting to track these funds and make sure that they're all being used appropriately. And so that's the largest portion of that. Some of the other portions as we look at here, I'm trying to pull up my detail here real quick. We're also including, improvements to our community room for hybrid meetings. We've seen the improvements that brought during COVID, allowing more public access to our meetings, being able to do hybrid meetings like this, like we are tonight, and expanding that to our community room for other public meetings that we host in there as well. And then there's also a portion here for election equipment. And, I think we can't state highly enough how important our elections are and the safety of our election equipment and being able to utilize that properly.
Thank you for that. The other thing as well, on the slide that talked about the general fund revenue projected to increase approximately 5% to $75 million. It has the portion of the pie, the largest portion from property taxes. Could you share a little bit? I mean, obviously, this is a bit of a bizarro economy that we're living through right now. Could you share a little bit about, what trends you're anticipating in terms of property taxes, when impacts might be in place because of those trends?
In terms of future trends coming? Sure. I think we're largely expecting, the real estate and commercial market to cool off a bit here. 2022, 2023, we saw a significant increase, or 2021, 2022, sorry, getting ahead of myself. Significant increase in property values and sales that were occurring. At some point, that does have to cool off, but we still maintain, you know, a standard base that we're hoping to achieve of, you know, 3 to 4% per year. And, you know, just kind of highlight too, we are limited in how much we can grow in a given year based on Headley and Prop A. So we'd use, you know, I'll kind of use layman's terms, like a 2-year rolling average of the CPI that kind of caps us on growth of properties that don't sell. So, you know, we do have that cap in place that property values or taxable values cannot, you know, hopefully not tax someone out of their home. That was kind of the intention back in the 90s. As we've seen, there's good effects to that and negative effects where our revenues then are capped. And so as values and things improve, we're capped at how much more we can do with those funds.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from commission? Okay, seeing no other questions this time, just a couple things. First of all, thank you, Manager Risma and Treasurer Vicincy. I appreciate your work on this, bringing this document forward. And just one thing I do want to note is we're talking about, I know often when we talk about percentages of what we might pay for public safety, you know, we're talking about percentages relative to the general fund portion of our budget. So in the grand scheme of things, our whole budget is $300 million. The spending on KDPS is about 34, which gives a little bit under 12%, I think, of the total budget. So just a little reflection as far as that goes in terms of how we're spending our money overall. So just some thinking about this big picture, and as you already alluded to, you know, going forward here, I know there's a lot of talk about the possibility of a recession. I know to some extent, you know, it's a lagging kind of revenue source for us, the way that property taxes based on property values respond. But what has the administration's thinking been about being prepared for you know, a slower growth or a recessionary period, particularly in in property tax revenue? How has your thinking kind of been rolled into this budget?
Sure. I think, you know, the first thing I'd highlight is going back to the slide on our fund balance. You know, we're still above our policy target of 15% of operating revenue. You know, that alone gives us additional time to react as, you know, the market may or may not change going forward. So that's a huge portion of it, that we have that flexibility built in with our targets and our current reserves. You know, the other portion is, as you mentioned, there's a lag. It's usually 18 months, maybe even a little bit longer, depending on the exact timing of when things start to turn. They don't turn overnight. We don't suddenly lose property tax revenue in June. It's the next year that property tax revenue declines. And so, you know, we work directly, you know, the assessing office works under management services. We work with them, you know, on a regular basis to talk about what are the trends they're seeing, where are the property values going, how are sales going, and, you know, just kind of keeping an ear on that as close as we can, that as things start to turn, we'll be able to adjust more quickly.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know that we established a number like 15% and then hold true to that local policy. I know some adjacent jurisdictions, I think actually the county itself as well, has 25% fund balance that they adhere to, as far as I know. How is it appropriate to choose what that amount needs to be and what makes sense? Do you have any ideas about setting that standard for ourselves?
Yeah, we use a number of, you know, resources at our availability. You know, I think the number one thing I'd point to is county finances and city finances can be significantly different and act significantly different. Our expenses are completely different than what their expenses are. You know, we look at, you know, GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, ICMA, I forget exactly what that one stands for off the top of my head, but other national recognized groups that help us set these policies. You know, we look at other fund balance policies for large cities. You know, some cities are as low as 5%. Some are as high as 15, 20, some maybe 30. Kind of, it's all relative a little bit, because the smaller your budget is, probably the higher you want that reserve, because you have less flexibility. So township may be significantly more than what we are here as a city.
Right.
And we are probably significantly less than a Chicago or a New York.
Sure. So as it relates to that, just another thing is that a lot of a capital investment happening, which is fantastic that we're investing in our infrastructures. That is something we absolutely need to do. That is because we're borrowing money. So when you think about borrowing money, you know, our interest rates are up a bit right now. Any concerns there are borrowing relative to our budget? And as you watch those kinds of things for capital investment, it's good to get the work done, but, you know, we're borrowing the money to do that. So what's your thinking about all that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the current environment with interest rates rising, we want to be very careful about the amounts we're actually bonding. So some of the things we can do to adjust is, you know, we may not bond 100% of the capital plan because this capital plan is in many ways ambitious. You know, we've worked with our rate consultants. There are other cities that bond approximately 75% of their water capital plan because they know they can't get 100% of the work done in any given year. And then they just keep an eye on the rolling amount that's coming forward and make sure they're bonding appropriately. So there are ways that we are looking to reduce our bonding in the short term while still maintaining a capital plan. But then it may require us to bond a little bit more in the future. But hopefully, you know, as we watch federal policy on interest rates, you know, they've talked about potentially reducing interest rates again in 2024. And so we just kind of keep all that in mind as we're bonding and taking a look at what's available.
What kinds of opportunities become available for us when we're doing this bonding in terms of being able to refinance, let's say, 5 years in the future or something like that if interest rates go down again?
Yep, so we can, you know, the way we do our bonding, we can always refinance after about 7 years. So we have 7 years where we're locked in. After that point, then we can refinance and roll that into a lower interest rate. I'm sure looking at the last couple of years' agendas, we saw quite a bit of refinancing coming our way. You know, we got close to doing refinancing for our other post-employment benefit bonds. Didn't quite work out. And part of that was just due to that 7 years. The further you are away from that, the less predictability you have. And we kind of got to a point where we were comfortable, and then the market ran away from us.
Right,
So.
right. So related to that, and you brought up OPEB, there is nothing in this budget that pays for our pensions, for example. And can you just talk a little bit about that, why we don't have money budgeted in here to cover that pension liability, which I think amounts to about $30 million a year, more or less?
Yeah, so we spend roughly $30 million on our pension every year. Our overall pension fund, as of our 12/31/2021 study, we were 135% funded on a valuation basis or 153% funded on a market basis. Obviously, the market's changed quite a bit, so we tend to try to stick with that valuation basis as it's a little more sturdy. It builds in a 5-year rolling average of investment gains and losses. So we'll have a down year this year. We'll be bringing in gains from prior years into that valuation. So you'll see it largely level out. I do not expect a huge impact to that valuation basis in this upcoming year. It's if we have multiple years in a row where we have investment losses that we'll see that change. And so that's really where our pension fund currently is. Our OPEB fund also, you know, with changes that we've made here into our retiree health plan, you know, last year was 80% funded, which is a significant improvement over prior years where we were around 40% funded. And so we continue to see that improvement as well and hope to see improved experience on our healthcare plan due to those changes that were made.
I appreciate that. That's one thing I think sometimes we fail to recognize in this budget process, how much help we certainly get, a great deal of help here that cushions things from the Foundation for Excellence, but also having those endowments that are helping with our OPEB payments, our other post-employment benefits, and our pension keeps all that spending out of the general fund, which could be a big number in that general fund if we had to spend money to fund that there. Thank you, Steve. Are there any other, are we getting into something else here this evening, or?
We do have one more slide here.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's any other comments or discussion. Just kind of highlight next steps here. So tonight we'll be bringing to our regular commission business meeting a resolution to set the public hearing for January 3rd. And then next Monday night, we will have our budget work session. And then after our budget work session, we'll wait until January 3rd to have that public hearing where the public can come and comment. They can also come to the budget work session as well. These are open meetings that we want public participation at. And then finally, we will be requesting a vote on January 17th of the overall budget.
All right, thank you, appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And I just want to highlight a couple of things a little bit different this year. So what you saw this evening was something last year you saw in the work session. Excuse me. What we just thought we'd do is bring it into this committee of the whole to allow next week more time to focus on details of the 2023 budget, digging into departmental programs or proposals. And so anything that was presented this evening could be brought back up for question or anything like that next week. And then on the 3rd, we also have a committee of the whole that right now there isn't anything scheduled. We are holding it just in case we need to follow up with budget, having that time available. Otherwise, we'll probably be requesting that it be canceled given the holiday season and all of that. So just a heads up there. And then we also have a committee of the whole on the 17th, although that's pushing it with regard to budget. So.
Thank you, Manager Rissman, I appreciate that. So just walking through the next steps here, I know we don't have any times necessarily. It looks like we're still looking to nail down a time for our December 12th budget work session. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can talk about that here. So we could do it at 5 p.m. Usually we allocate 3 hours for that, so 5 to 8 or 6 to 9, really dependent on what the commission prefers.
All right, I don't know if people want to think about it and get back in touch.
Yeah.
Jim, about that? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
And also, it was brought to my attention, thank you, Commissioner Pradel, that actually the KPS schedule is a little different this year. And will there still be vacation going that week for KPS? Is that correct?
It's my understanding it goes through the 6th.
Through the 6th. So that's just one thing we'll be keeping in mind is that that's going to be an important meeting here, but it's going to be, as a matter of fact, for those who have children at home, it will still be during the time when they're around, so. Maybe
we can certainly move that the following week. I think from a budget standpoint, it would, well, that's a good question. If we end up moving it, then we would need to change the date in the resolution setting the public hearing for the following Monday. So we'll just have to make sure that gets covered if that indeed happens.
All right, thank you, Manager Rissman. Anything else from Commission for the Cow? Attorney Robinson?
I'm going to make a flip comment, but
Okay, thank you. Discretion is the better part of valor.
well, now you've asked me. If you move it to the second Monday, that's going to conflict with the Georgia-Michigan championship game.
Don't want to do that.
Let's move it.
Ohio State fans in the audience. All right, then. I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. This is the end of our committee of the whole meeting, our budget, our regular, I'm sorry, Commissioner Decker.
Yes, I was wondering, we're ending kind of early. Didn't know if this is the time that we can talk about our discussion on our new city attorney. Are we able to have that discussion here? Talk about that, or do we need to wait for the regular public?
Well, maybe if Commissioner Juarez will be here for the regular meeting, maybe better to wait for that. I assume he will be, as far as I know.
Okay.
You okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Pradel.
Something I know is probably on a couple of our minds too is just about evals, appointee evals as well. And just, not waiting until January to get that process underway. I don't think Director HR Director Shelley Dusick is here, but just something we should probably be thinking about, because goal to get that to the appointees earlier than later.
Yep, I agree, and I think we're teed up for that. Maybe we'll have a discussion just to touch base on that topic between our meetings here. Seeing nothing else, we'll see each other at 7 o'clock. We're adjourned.